Oh, we needed us out to log in too? Mhm.
I need to check with my tech over there, Brian, to make sure that we are live streaming. We are live. All right.
Excellent. This meeting of the Centennial School Board meeting is called to order at 7:03 on April 13th, 2022, and a quorum is present. Hello and welcome, everyone. The meeting agenda has been distributed in your board pack. Are there any amendments needed to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Agenda is presented.
Excellent. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 The ayes have it. We have a meeting agenda. Next, I'd like to hand it over to Superintendent Owens to introduce any guests.
Great. Thank you, Chair Solowski. So tonight I'd like to introduce Chad Smith. I don't know if Chad's in the gallery and can be promoted. Oh, there he is. Perfect. Great. So I'd like to introduce Chad Smith, our new interim district athletic director. Chad began his position with our district just after spring break on Monday, March 28th. Chad has extensive coaching experience in a variety of sports, including football, baseball, and basketball. He has taught for 9 years in the subject areas of health, life skills, and physical education, and most recently was an alternative education teacher at Umatilla High School. Additionally, his experience includes creating a transition program for students aged 18 through 21. Chad graduated with a bachelor's degree in science, exercise science, from Western Oregon University and has a master's in teaching and special education endorsement from Willamette University. He received his administrative license from Concordia University, Chicago. And please join me in welcoming Chad Smith to the Centennial community. Principal Scott Aguirre, do you have any additional comments before Chad introduces himself? Ari, can you hang on to your comments for just a moment? We're having an audio issue here. We want to make sure we can hear you. Try again. Still not working. Give us just a moment. Sorry. First hybrid meeting here. Yes, we can hear you now. Great. And Chad, do you have anything to share with the group here? Thanks, Chad, and I'll welcome the school board members if anyone has any comments that they'd like to make in introduction.
just want to thank you for coming in, Chad. And I really appreciate you stepping in, and go Bearcats.
Great. Well, welcome aboard, and I'll turn it back over to Chair Slawski.
Thank you so much. So at this point, we'd really like to take a moment to recognize our winter sport athletes. And we do have a short presentation on that. If we can roll that footage, great.
It's unfortunate. The music makes it better.
We have any old choir students that want to? No. Murphy's Law.
Greetings, everybody. Technical difficulties. We're trying to get the audio to work with the visuals. It makes it so much better. So thanks for bearing with us.
Way to go, winter athletes. Do we want to try to run that again with sound, or are we ready to move on to the next slideshow? Okay.
How was your spring break?
Thank you for your patience. No. Oh, I'm hearing something now.
Turn up your volume. Turn up your volume. We were listening to Jess's.
You're right, it really does make it much better. Thank you very much. Can we all have a round of applause? So in addition to student athletes, we have a tremendous amount of students on the honor roll this year. We could literally fill the time of this meeting by announcing them all. So we have put together a little presentation recognizing all seniors with a 4.0 for the last grading period. Give us a second while that video loads. Thank you, Secretary Jordan,
You're very welcome.
and assistants. Thank you so much. Excellent. We will move on to the approval of the minutes. So the previous minutes draft has been distributed in your board pack. Are there any corrections or amendments to the minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
To approve the minutes.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Let's see here. Next, we're moving on to, we have no public forum comments. Is that correct for the day?
No, we do not today.
Thank you. Next, we move on to reports. I'd like you to join me in congratulating CHS senior Jesse Fonseca for his recent college exceptions and exciting news going on. Jesse, do you have a report to share with us today?
Jesse does not appear to be in the. There he is. Let's let him in.
Oh, hi everyone.
Hey, Jesse.
Almost missed you guys. Yeah, thank you for your your kind words. I am very happy to say that I am going to be attending Stanford University in the fall, so that is very exciting. And then I can share my high school report. So, okay, I can share screens. Perfect.
Let me take care of that for you.
Can everyone see?
Yes.
Okay. So hi everyone, my name is Jesse Fonseca, and here's an update at what's going on at the high school. So first, going over some of the spring sports. Um, with tennis, there are games going on every week, and I think today there was actually supposed to be a game with boys tennis um, at Barlow, or excuse me, with Barlow, but due to the hail that got postponed, girls will be having a game tomorrow at Barlow, and then baseball will be having a game tomorrow against Reynolds. Softball will excuse me, softball likely had a game tonight. I'm not sure if they also got rained out due to the hail, but they would have been against Reynolds tonight. Track and field just had a home meet a couple of days ago on the 12th, and we'll have another meet on Friday. And then included on this slide is the poster for cheer tryouts. So if anybody you know is interested in potentially joining the cheer team, anyone is eligible to apply, and those will be taking place tomorrow, the 15th and the 16th. Then I wanted to give some recognition to FBLA state placements because Centennial did really well at FBLA state. So here are some names. I'll be going through kind of what they placed in. So beginning with Connor, he got first place in Intro to Information Technology and 10th place in Intro to FBLA. Han got 7th place in Intro to FBLA and 8th place in Intro to Financial Math. Betty, Adabel, and Olivia together got 2nd place in, excuse me, social media strategies, which does qualify them for nationals. In addition to that, Emmanuel got 1st place in business calculations and intro to financial math, which also qualifies them for state. And last but not least, Matthew Vu got 1st place in securities and investments and mobile application development. So a big round of applause for all of our FBLA state competitors. Next, some of the more exciting events going on at the high school are senior prom, which was announced by our student council. Well, I'm personally really excited that we'll be having a senior prom. It is a little unfortunate that it's closed to only seniors, but it's understandable for COVID worries. It'll be at the Airy, at the Eagle Landing. It'll be happening on June 4th, so the Saturday after, I believe, that seniors are out of school, which is really shocking. I can't believe we made it this far. And they'll be going with the theme of A Night in the Clouds. Then is Powder Puff, so some of the more sports events that are happening, which is girls football. Guys are encouraged to join as cheerleaders, and they'll be divided by the junior cheerleaders and the senior cheerleaders, respectively cheering on the junior and senior girls teams. Then is the He-Man game coming up, so it's boys volleyball. Powder Puff, He-Man, they're kind of like genders joining the other sport. So with girls football and then boys volleyball, this will also be open to juniors and seniors, and the winning team will face the girls varsity team, and then the winning team of that will be facing the teachers. Both of these have deadlines that are coming up. I believe Powder Puff is this Friday, and then He-Man is next Wednesday on the 20th. So if anyone's interested, be sure to get those in quickly. Then we have, I believe, the drama's last production for the spring musical, which is the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. So I remember attending the Musie's musical my freshman or sophomore year, and that was a really amazing production. So I'm excited for this one. It'll be happening on May 5th through 7th, the 12th through 13th, and 14th at the times listed. So for the first couple of days, it'll be at 7 p.m. And then on the 14th, they'll have 2 showings at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Seats are reserved, so you're encouraged to reserve online either at the link on the poster or on the QR code. $12 for adults, $10 for seniors and students. And I also wanted to recognize the seniors in the drama department, who are Mary DeJoux and Julia Stanley, because it'll likely be their last production here at the high school. So with all that, thank you for your time, and if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions for Jesse? Thank you so much for your time, Jesse. We are very proud of you.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations, Jesse. I had the chance to commiserate with your mom last week when we were at an event, but I haven't had the chance to recognize you in person or virtually, so congratulations on all of your accomplishments.
Thank you. Now, Superintendent Owens, I'm going to turn it over to you for
Great. It's good to see everybody in person for our first hybrid board meeting. As of last Friday, I've now officially met every board member in person, having met Director Lynn for the first time at the OSBA listening session on Friday evening. And I saw him yesterday for our rehearsal and today for a board meeting, so 3 times in a week now after having met you in person first time. So good to see everybody in person. It's nice to be able to have this experience. And thank you to our technology department and Director Southerton for getting all the technology set up to allow all of this to happen. So speaking of the OSBA listening session, it was also good to see Director Andrews there. The listening session was an opportunity to meet with other East County superintendents and board members and to provide input to OSBA Executive Director Jim Green about some of the areas of priority for East Multnomah County, as well as some of the leadership challenges we've all experienced over the last couple of years. Last Friday was a busy day as also, along with Chief Swenson, I attended the OSBA Bonds, Buildings, and Ballots Conference in Salem. The conference is held every 2 years, and one thing that stood out for me during the conference is that preparing for a bond is essentially a 2-year process. The presenter of one of the breakout sessions laid out a 2-year plan with key activities as a roadmap for districts. And with that in mind, knowing that we have a step down built into our current bond in 5 years, believe it or not, it's nearly time for us to start thinking about the actions the district will need to take for our long-range facilities planning process. In fact, in a subsequent report tonight, Director Southerton will talk a bit about the efforts we're proposing with respect to our long-range facilities plan, and I'll stop there so as to not steal Director Southerton's thunder. Chief Swenson is working on the final touches of the spring 2022 report to the community, highlighting the district's efforts over the last year. Our intention is to send the report to all district residents in late May. The articles were submitted today to the graphic designers we are using to lay everything out. I plan to share a preview of the report to the community to the board prior to its distribution to the community. As a reminder, the report to the community is sent to the community twice per year as a part of the community and partnerships aspect of Destination 2023. As we continue to plan for more normalized experiences for students, Centennial High School is in the process of planning for the return of graduation ceremonies to the Memorial Coliseum on Thursday, June 9th, 2022 at 7 p.m. CHS administration is working hard with respect to the logistics of tickets, caps and gown distribution, etc. The graduation ceremony will be for students at both CHS and Centennial Virtual Academy, and I will let Principal Scott Aguirre share any additional information she might have on the topic. Putting you on the spot, Mari. If you don't have anything, that's just fine as well.
Those are the basics. We'll continue to get out the rest of the information as we define it.
Great. And on a brief final note, over the weekend, and I just got this information today, Pleasant Valley Elementary, led by Mr. Namo, participated in the state chess tournament and ended up winning the state championship. So congratulations to the Pleasant Valley Chess for Success team. So I welcome any questions the board might have regarding the topic shared, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Chair, I don't know if to turn this.
Yes.
Can I ask a question of the superintendent? When you were talking about the bonds and the 2-year, they do the presentation every 2 years, but the impression that you came away with is that we need to be preparing 2 years in advance, correct?
Yes, so I referenced 2 years in 2 different spots during the report. So they offer the conference every 2 years, and the planning process for a district to go out for a bond is a 2-year process that backwards plans basically from the election date back 2 years with key activities that the district should undertake in that 2-year time frame.
So we did an extensive plan, facilities plan, that we know the below the line already, but those will have to be reassessed in a similar process, or and maybe this is something that Director Southerton and you will be talking to us in the future about, because we have the list, but we don't know if that list is concurrent or in the proper order?
That is going to be part of Director Southerton's report tonight, is he'll speak to the below-the-line topics, but you bring up a good point, because we had the below-the-line, and another thing that they talked about that I thought was important during that conference is the importance of having current information within a window of time. So whatever we did for the facilities planning process in 2019, by the time we're at a point of going out for a bond again, should be refreshed and updated. And what was learned by the course of actually performing the bond work is informing. So what we'll have is the long-range facilities plan that we had previously, plus the knowledge that we have with having Scott Rose and other contractors on site doing the work. And then all of that, I think, would combine together to inform what sort of below-the-line projects we should undertake with any leftover funds that we have.
Then the only thing I would ask in addition to that is that, yes, for Centennial Kids, had a steering committee, that several of us in this room were working on that. It sounds like we should try to align and discuss with, that's a separate, pact, if you will, from the district, but that we really need to bring them in sooner rather than later in the process. Many people participated in that long-range facility plan and then moved right into that work, but the more that we can connect those individuals, I think the better off we'll be, and having a larger number, a cadre, if you will, of really informed community members to reinvigorate that group.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my thought process here, and we'll want to enfranchise Director Southerton in the discussion, so if you have anything to share, feel free to come up and share it too. But what I would say is he and I have had some conversations over the last week about just this topic in terms of how do we address any leftover funds, and in terms of how do we incorporate that into the planning process. What I had mentioned and talked about was when we had the long-range facilities planning process, we had what was offered on the bond for the public to vote on, and then what was below the line, and all of that was prioritized. And so even what was below the line had some prioritization. All things are not equal. There were things that the community felt were, or the long-range facility planning committee felt were important. And we also had statistical polling that was conducted at that time as well. So that offered an impression of what community support there was for various projects that we were considering whether they were above or below the line. And so I think that that information, both in terms of the long-range facilities plan that was conducted previously, plus new discoveries that we found by virtue of doing the bond, plus the statistical polling, is all information that can be fed to whichever stakeholder group. And I think your suggestion is great in terms of how we move that work forward in terms of informing what we do next. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Shields. Are there any other questions?
I just wanted to kind of put out the timeline, kind of as we talked about it, just to make sure that everyone in the room kind of is familiar with it. So the bond passed in 2020, and one of the ways we aligned the financing was there would be a dip 8 years after the passing of the bond, so that we could potentially go out for another bond without increasing people's tax ratio. Excuse me, their tax liability. So, am I stealing your thunder?
No, I just want to be here for the questions.
Okay. So, I'm just kind of talking about the timeline. So that would put it at 2028. If we need 2 years to prepare, that'd be 2026, and we're in 2022. Is that all that accurate? Just so, or
Is it 5 to 8? Was the range 5 to 8 years for the debt? We were gonna look at that.
I believe it was 8.
We're about 4.5 years out from the dip, as Carol shared with me, Carol from Piper Sanders
Okay.
shared with me recently. So we're about 4.5 years away from that dip down to a lower.
Got it.
About 4.5 years away from a dip down to that lower number.
Thank you. And so, it sounds like a long time, but it's actually not.
Correct, and the work that we do now will benefit us in multiple ways. It could inform the Bond Oversight Committee as well as this body on what we could potentially use the bond contingency funds for, as well as inform what a future new bond may look like. So it would be helpful, in my opinion, I'm recommending as part of my proposal, that we reconvene that long-range facilities planning committee to update the plans that we've done already, incorporate the knowledge that we've gained through the construction projects we've done over the last 1.5 to 2 years, and then inform what the board may want to consider putting on a future ballot measure.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia?
Isn't the
Dr.
debt
Andrews.
service schedule in the budget document?
The debt service schedule is in the budget document. What you don't see is the mill rate, which is what folks are referencing. It drops down from approximately 119 per $1,000 assessed down to an estimated 89 cents per 1,000 assessed.
But can't we tell from the debt service schedule the dip date?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You can look at it and infer what's there, yes.
Okay.
And then I can reach out to Piper Sanders to share their presentation that they shared with me and show you exactly what year it's on. And then there's, of course, ideas on when you go out for bond. So what election do you want to coincide with, et cetera. So multiple things to consider.
It takes up a considerable amount of time for the board, as well as informing the citizens that are willing to do work on a path for Centennial kids. There are board members who were highly involved in looking at chess. We were in your house how much of the time in terms of our steering committee, and so there's a lot of extra time that is unnecessary, and the more people that we can have, as with all things, the more hands that can share the duties and responsibilities and getting the word out, the better off we're going to be. And those hands have to be well informed, because they're the ones that get asked a lot of questions.
Thank you. Any further questions? Great, at this point, we'll move on to our next report. Superintendent Owens.
All right, we've got Director Southerton and Scott Rose with RNC Management. Scott is joining us virtually tonight, and they are here to present the quarterly bond report. Before Scott shares, Director Southerton, do you have any opening comments to share?
I'd just like to reiterate my appreciation to the Bond Oversight Committee. We've met with just a few weeks ago and they offered us valuable feedback and insights to the project, and I appreciate all the engagement that the Bond Oversight Committee and this body is offering us. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Rose.
All right, thank you. And can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. All right, I should be sharing on the screen the report that you received last week, and I'll go through that bond activity. And we are, as you no doubt have seen, doing construction in a variety of areas. Here on the cover, you can see just work in the Media Center at Oliver, and then the Meadows Gymnasium. And this picture was from Thursday last week. There's obviously more framing up at the Meadows Gymnasium since in the course of the last week. So a lot of construction activity happening. And I'll go to the body of the report here. And so completed projects, I think it's important that we also see where we've been, identifying all the projects that have been completed. And what's good about the approach the district has taken is that there has been work at multiple sites across the district. Every single school has had some activity over the course of the last 1.5 years. And so, again, it's important to note that you are trying to make sure that you're bringing up, if you will, all buildings at the same time. I won't read these individually, but they are in the report. Certainly, if you have questions, please let me know.
Scott, is it possible to make your graphics a little bit bigger to fill up more of the screen, like the tables?
Absolutely. Would that be, does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, absolutely. So projects in pre-construction, this is where they're either in design or in bidding. And with each month, this list gets smaller and smaller, and that's where we want to be. Either projects are done or projects are in construction. So we have a number of projects to the board tonight for your review and approval for award. And you can see those identified in red, and we'll go over those more later this evening as you're looking at the recommendations for award. We have a few projects that we are trying to negotiate with the general contractors to incorporate in their work rather than bidding separately, as the general contractors will be able to leverage their on-site presence to manage those subcontractors. Right now, we only have a single project that is left to be designed, and that is what we're calling mechanical repairs phase 2 or part 2. The board awarded, I believe it was in March, phase 1, which included the 4 elementary schools, mechanical improvements and controls replacement, the 4 elementary schools that are receiving gymnasiums, Meadows, Park Lane, Patrick Lynch, and Powell Butte. This part 2 will be for the remaining 5 school sites, the high school, middle school, Oliver, and then Butler Creek and Pleasant Valley, all to varying degrees. Please note that the high school and Butler Creek already have a digital control system, so the work there will be less comparatively. There's still mechanical repairs, obviously, to do at both of those sites as well. Projects in construction. We want this list to keep getting bigger until things get completed and then come off the list. As you all know, the tennis court replacement is all but done. We have the surfacing left to do. Right now, they're targeting late May if the weather holds. Obviously, today being a bad example. But if the weather holds, they'll be doing that late May, immediately following the tennis season. The tennis season ends May 13th. So they would not want to interrupt practices or games. They would immediately come in afterwards and get the last of the surfacing completed. You can see IT closets, pool repairs are underway. The pool is drained. There's going to be a lot of activity in the pool next week as they saw cut up the pool floor. They're going to be replacing the plumbing, the piping that feeds the pool. And so a lot of exciting activity. We had a construction meeting this afternoon, and we discussed the finalization of the tile work, as well as some of the mechanical equipment and some of the technical pool equipment. So a lot of items already on order. We're still targeting the end of August for completion of the pool. Obviously, all of that is always dependent upon whether or not we can get all the equipment and materials on site. So we're scrambling to do that for some of the longer lead items. Mechanical repairs, lighting replacement, so on and so forth. The ADA ramp is starting this week over at Pleasant Valley. That was an added project to address the accessibility issues for the original building at Pleasant Valley. And then, as you can see here, just to remind the board, is that with each of the larger projects, Oliver, CMS, and the 4 gym sites, we also had other work that was also being done by that same general contractor under that scope. So for instance, at Meadows, that same contractor that's building your gymnasium right now, this summer will also complete flooring abatement, roof repairs, window repairs, and constructing a new security vestibule at the main entry. So that work is coupled under the general contractor scope so that we can be more efficient with that scope. And then non-bond projects, we're also tracking these because these are projects that we're working through concurrently with the bond work. We'll be talking with the board later tonight about a suggested award to an engineering firm for the turf and stadium project. And then also we have a number of other smaller projects that we're working through, both with non-bond funds and ESSER funds and some grant monies. So that is ongoing. Budget summary. I'll make this a little bit smaller so we can kind of capture it all there. So where we're sitting, there we go. So right now we have a $70.4 million overall budget. We have encumbered $54.466 million of that budget. We have a projected expenditures, if you will, of 21.47 or the remainder. We're not projecting to spend all of that remainder, but that remainder is necessary to get us, maybe necessary to get us to the finish line. So as we talk about projects below the line and what we want to incorporate or do now, we always want to be careful until we get a lot of our bond promises completely built and get, if you will, out of the high risk phase of the work. We have to be very cautious about how much that we spend. So you can see in the unencumbered is about 21.47. Of the projected funds, 6.2 million recently bid and estimated 7.5 million in bidding and pricing. So right now, we're still expecting right now to encumber about 13.7 of that 21.4. But that's not to say that there won't be change orders that come up during the course of construction and other things that will bump that 13.7 projected expenditure up further. But I do anticipate that we will have bond funds left over, contingency funds left over when we're all done with the bond promises. Grant summary. This is always good information. People like to hear about grants that we received. The grants so far, these are the grants that are committed. So as you can see from the Energy Trust of Oregon, we have 173,000, over 173,000 that's been committed to the district. And that is reimbursed at the end of those projects. So when those projects are completed, you get that money afterward. We do have authorization to spend the district's existing Senate Bill 1149 funds. And Director Southerton could talk more about the specifics of the 1149 funds. Right now, the district has a little over $700,000 in those funds, but you're not allowed to spend them except for energy reduction measures, and the state of Oregon has authorized that expenditure. So they have authorized you to spend $581,000 plus that are sitting in an account currently. So that's basically like a grant, but a grant that you had in an account. And then of course the seismic rehabilitation grant that you know of at Pleasant Valley, we received that. We have submitted for 2 more seismic rehabilitation grants, which we anticipate to find out by the end of May, so the end of next month. That would be for the remaining work at Oliver. If you'll recall, the city is having us do some seismic improvements there as part of the renovation project. This would be for the remaining seismic improvements. And then Powell Butte seismic improvements. Right now, there's nothing scheduled at Powell Butte. If we find that we are going to get the grant at Powell Butte, that could affect some of the roofing that we do this summer because it would involve some of the roof sheathing. And please also note that for the lighting, some recent changes have been made that may allow us to get larger grants. Those grants, you can see most of those are $20,000 grants. It may allow for some of those to increase in value. None of them would decrease. This is the minimum you would get for the lighting grants. And then also the ETO has initiated a one-time grant opportunity for roof insulation. We're trying to compile that information right now to determine district eligibility, but you may be getting some grants for roof insulation as well. I'll know better next month. So good grant opportunities there. When you look at all the work that you're doing, you add these up together, you've got over $3.2 million in added funds that you didn't have the day you passed the bond. Any questions on those grants? Okay. And then use of local.
There's a question, Scott.
My apologies. Yes.
No, Scott, it's not a problem. When we say lighting, are we always referring to inside lighting? Because there's outdoor lighting and there's inside lighting, right? And outdoor lighting is under security and indoor lighting is just under lighting. I'm trying to find the definition.
Absolutely, great question. So the current lighting packages are replacing all of the interior lighting at 5 sites, the 4 gym sites as well as Pleasant Valley. And so right now we're not identifying any exterior lighting to be replaced. However, Director Southerton will talk here a little bit later about expanded security measures and parking lot measures, which would include a reevaluation of some of the parking lot lighting. I've walked through 3 of the sites in the dark with Pete Jeter, and we've identified some dark spots. Some would require additional pole lighting or different lighting, and some would require wall packs on the buildings, as opposed to standalone lighting in a parking lot closer to the building. But right now, the current lighting replacement only includes interior lighting. And that interior lighting replacement is a 1-for-1 replacement. So we pull out a fixture, put in another one, and all of them currently are fluorescent and they would all become LED lights. Any other questions?
Nope, thank you.
All right, thank you. Use of locals. So folks are Always interested in that information. How are we leveraging dollars to various local trades? So we're looking at this from in terms of construction dollars. Not all the various little consultants like surveyors and other things, but really just looking at construction, if you will, at each of the sites. So it's difficult to identify within district versus out of district, or whether or not they have an employee in district. So we're utilizing mile radiuses from the district office as a barometer, if you will. That's the current metric that we're utilizing. So this particular list is within 5 miles of the district office. And so you can see there the different contract values that we've had in respect to within 5 miles of the district office. So all of these vendors that you see here, McDonald Miller, 2TKG contractors, which is up for your review this evening, Britton Excavating, Reliable Fencing, just a variety here, Superior Interiors, all of these folks have addresses within 5 miles of the district office. This accumulates to just shy of $5.5 million of construction dollars that have stayed within 5 miles of your district office. So most of these are in district, if you will. And if they're not in district, they're just right on the fringe of your district. And this is the total construction value that we've awarded to date. So just under 50 million. So about 11%. Would be within 5 miles of the district office. When you expand that, you say, okay, within 20 miles. So 20 miles gets to sort of, if you will, downtown Portland, if you will. So 20 miles is not terribly far away, but as you're looking at Centennial and the number of commercial businesses you have in district, when you expand that to a 20-mile radius, and you're really looking at like Vancouver, and you're looking at downtown Portland, and you're incorporating that in, that's still very much local. A lot of districts that I work with, they define local as in county. And so, again, every district measures that differently. So within 20 miles of the district office, all of these additional folks come into play. And some of these are like, 12 miles or 8 miles or something. So, but these are all within 20 miles of the district office. Again, 3 contracts that we're going to be reviewing this evening. Influence that. I've also included, when you have a large general contractor like PNC Construction or Emmerich Construction, I've included all the subcontractors that work under them as well. Because while the general contractor may be somewhere else, the subcontractors are here locally. And so I wanted to make sure that we incorporated all of them. And you can see here that up to 20 miles out is 53%, and that's cumulative. So that's all the ones from the prior list, and here combine everything up to 20 miles out, you're spending over half your bond funds, over half, on contractors within 20-mile radius. So 53% there. And then lastly, I just went 30 miles out because that then takes kind of the far end of Portland, as well as kind of like down to not as far as say Wilsonville, but in that general area, and you start to get some of the Tigard and Hillsborough folks as well. And you start to see some additional dollars spent there. Emmerich Construction, who's your general contractor for CMS and Oliver, they're at approximately 28 miles away over in Tualatin. So as I, kind of widening that circle and looking to see what we define as local. And so you can see that we spend over 75% of your bond funds to contractors within 30 miles of the district office. And so that's something that's exciting to see. That really bodes well for the commitments and promises that you made to your community. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do we know what % of our contractors or subcontractors we use that are of minority or women-owned businesses?
We have not been tracking that,
Okay,
but we can ask that question. Yes.
so we did not set a goal for that at the beginning when we were looking at that? Nope, okay, great. Just curious.
No, that wasn't set. I do know, for instance, BEK of Alaska that's doing, if you peek out your window where you're at right now and you see all that nice framing going up for the New Meadows Gymnasium, BEK of Alaska is minority owned. And they're doing that metal framing, and they've got a $2.5 million contract right there.
That's great.
I just know them from prior work on other jobs. And I think if I went through here, there's a few others The ones doing your ramp over at Pleasant Valley, smaller project, but they're doing the ramp project. That is a women-owned business.
Great.
So I know of a couple of them anecdotally, but we've not been tracking that.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly. And then always the fun part here is just a few job photos. There's lots and lots of photos. All of your major contractors are using what's called Procore. That's an online system. You have to get password invited to, but they incorporate a lot of photos. They do daily photos. They're required to do daily reports and daily photos. And so I look at those and then I just sort of grab some of the most, I'll say, I don't want to say memorable, but just some of the ones that convey the most activity. So certainly, your pool work is a bit underway. All I'm showing you here is that the pool is drained. Next week is going to look night and day different. They're going to be doing a lot of saw cutting, a lot of demolition. But if you can follow my cursor, we have two pipelines that run right about here and right about there, and they're going to be cutting up the floor of the pool to replace that plumbing that is corroded, no longer active for you. There's a lot of work that's happening in the mechanical room down in the basement below the pool to improve the flow around the pool. We have a gutter system that is deteriorated and actually is no longer code compliant. The gutter system all the way around the pool, that is being replaced. The diving stands, or the starting blocks, if you will, those are being replaced. Diving board is being replaced. Just a variety of exciting things. And like I say, right now, we're looking at a completion of the end of August, pending delivery of material. Rod Lundgren is in on our weekly contractor meeting, so he's been a good resource as we've been asking questions. Centennial Middle School Media Center, a lot of stuff has been stripped out of there. I don't know if you've peek through the windows. These windows in the hallway right here get a lot of nose prints from a lot of kids. They like to see what's going on in there. We did a full abatement. They saw cut up the slab because we're running in some floor power. We'll get a lot of new cabinetry, kind of a mix of some existing that will remain and new cabinetry. There's a new workroom, or student workroom, if you will, kind of a hands-on lab that's going makerspace, they call it, that'll be adjacent to the library. And so they're working on that right now. They're putting in the steel this afternoon as I was over there taking a look at that in terms of structural. When we talk about structure, notice the scale here. We have men in a pit up to their heads here. This is at Oliver. This is in the media center. This is some of the seismic work that the city required us to do. So this is a very deep footing that we're putting in. We've got a couple other footings in the building as well. And this essentially creates an anchor on your building and stiffens your building. We tie then a shear wall that goes up from this footing all the way to the roof deck. And so that helps stiffen the building in certain strategic locations. But I incorporated this picture, though, that this picture is about a week and a half to 2 weeks old, but just to give you a sense of how big these footings are. So when you understand we're doing seismic improvements, it's massive. Because not only are you filling that hole, you had to dig it to begin with, and so there's a lot that goes into those seismic improvements. And then just two more pages here. So Meadows, as I've mentioned to you, a lot of framing going in progress, a lot of masonry block in progress. They've done a lot of the waterproofing around there. And when we talk about quality control, so I've been walking the site and doing inspections of the quality of the work. The architects and engineers have gone through and done inspections of the quality of the work. The city does inspections of the quality of the work. You have independent consultants that are what we call special inspectors and testers. They have to go through by code and check things as a third-party investigator. So you have that inspection for quality control. And you've also hired an envelope consultant. And the envelope consultant is looking at everything around the building perimeter, from the vapor barrier below the slab to all the siding to the roofing and all the door and window openings. And so you have all these different folks making sure you're getting good quality. Does that mean something can't slip through? No, but with that many eyes on things, I feel real confident in the quality of the product that you're receiving for the bond investment. And at Park Lane, again, we're excavating footings. Right now, the rebar or the reinforcement bar is placed. I believe we're pouring concrete for the footings at the end of this week. Slab could be as early as the end of next week. And this is right off of the library at Park Lane. And last page, Patrick Lynch, the concrete slab has been placed. Framing has been delivered. Framing will start, I think it was supposed to start today. I can confirm that in the schedule. But we have two different framing crews. So a framing crew that's working on Meadows, and then one will jump to Patrick Lynch. And then Meadows will get to a point where then they can splinter off and go to Park Lane. And then Powell Butte will be the last one. Powell Butte is dragging behind because of some discovered septic tanks that were old and abandoned, but not abandoned properly. They were still on the city's records as active. They're not active, but they have to be decommissioned. And because they're within a certain number of feet from the gymnasium, we can't ignore that direction, because if that septic tank was to fail sometime in the future, that could negatively impact your gymnasium based on its proximity. So we did have to go through a Powell Butte, slow that work down a little bit, and in some cases excavate the tanks. In other cases, we have to do what we call potholing, find the tops, break those open, and then fill those with what we call CDF, basically kind of a thin slurry concrete. So, and that, yeah, so that's kind of the last photo page. In respect to the district's long-range facility planning discussion prior to this report, you had incorporated educationally or educational programs these 4 gymnasiums. And so I would just encourage, I've facilitated a number of long-range facility planning discussions with various districts. You really want to take a look at the educational component too. Have that conversation with your educators and identify if there are educational components to add to the facility infrastructure as you go through and forward with that planning. So with that, any other questions? All right, thank you.
Questions? Thank you so much. That's really exciting to see all of that.
Great. Thanks so much, Scott, for your efforts. Really appreciate the work that you do to keep us organized and coordinated with all the various bond projects. It's highly skilled work, and we appreciate you providing it for us. I'll turn it back over to Director Southerton, who will be providing a bond board reserve account report.
All right. Well, you got to be in the room up here, I guess. So thank you for this opportunity to provide an update to the board and to the community for an update on our board reserve account, bond contingency fund, and our below the line needs of the district. I do want to clarify that these are 3 separate and distinct accounts. They can overlap if the board chooses to and others advise, but they are held in separate accounts and funds in the overall finances of the district, and they have separate intended purposes. So tonight I'll be discussing our ending fund balance for the district, the board reserve account, and the bond contingency funds. Ending fund balance, you may recall, is the savings and the contingency funding for the district as a whole. It is required by the district under board policy that was adopted in July of 2020 to be between 5 and 15% of the general fund average expenses. The ending fund balance heavily influences the district's credit rating and interest rates for bonds and other debts. You can think of it as your own assets when you're applying for credit or other things. People want to know that the district is going to repay those debts. And they look at our balance sheet, and if we have savings, if we have an ending fund balance. It also allows for the stabilization of programming when funding changes. You'll further recall at our budget meeting just a short time ago, we're able to avoid rifts, reductions, curtailment to programs, wide swings in the offerings for our students, because we have an ending fund balance that may be able to absorb the loss of some students next year and give us time to manage that transition rather than having for radical change. It also ensures adequate cash flow for operations. You may or may not know that all the grants that we receive are largely spent in advance with general funds and then get reimbursed. So while it looks like we have lower expenses, and we do at the end of the year, if something were to happen with the grant funds being delayed, we're out of pocket for those funds, and your fund balance carries you until that reimbursement comes. Now, our reimbursement partners are largely the state and the federal government, and they reimburse in a timely manner. But it is a fact that it's expensed with general funds first and then reimbursed. It's also the safety net for the district. If there are inter-year changes in funding from Salem or from others, if projections don't come in where we're supposed to be at, it allows for that safety net, again, so we're not making large swings in our programming and our changing in our services to students. It's also a best practice to have this fund balance of 5 to 15% as set by the Government Finance Association standards. The board reserve account is a separate account that was not funded by state school funds or funds dedicated to school operations. It was established by this body to stabilize district finances and to use revenues from the surplus property sales to make targeted long-term investment in district facilities and or programming. It is largely one-time funds, consists of largely one-time funds that once expensed, there's not an opportunity to refill in any quantity or size that they are now. It's unlikely to be replaced in the future. It can also be a source of emergency funding for the district if we do not have funding balance that supports us. And it requires board action for all uses. The administration cannot spend any money out of the board or reserve account without authorization from this body. Bond contingency funds, those are the remaining proceeds from the capital bond that was generously passed by Centennial community members in May of 2020 that has not yet been assigned to projects. Contingency is set aside for unanticipated expenses related to the approved bond projects, inflation, material delays, unforeseen conditions, like when we got into Oliver Elementary School, we had to do seismic upgrades, and similar. Unforeseen conditions, additional expenses that were unplanned or unforeseen. Additional projects or improvements may also be supported by the bond contingency funds if supported by the board. But largely the contingency is there to fund the projects, the bond promises, and the projects that we made first, and then remaining funds would be opportunities for this body to consider additional projects. Lastly, it's important to note that bond funds can only be spent on capital projects. They can't be spent on operations. They are approved by voters for capital projects, and so they're not for ongoing expenses and operations of district. To provide an update on our ending fund balance, after several years of declining enrollment and declining fund balance, the Board of Education, assisted by individual members of the Budget Committee, adopted a fund balance policy on July 8th, 2020, which requires the superintendent to manage adopted budgets to ensure the fund balance meets minimum standards, currently 5 to 15%. The administration worked with the board to identify the strategies and make difficult but necessary reductions to put the district on the path towards a stable financial footing. After 2 years of dedicated work with the support of the board, the budget committee, district staff, the district reserves are adequate and stable at this point. I'm very happy to report. In alignment with this policy, the ending fund balance is estimated to be 13% at the end of next school year. You may recall just a few years ago, the ending fund balance was $151,000 at the end of the year. To put that in perspective, we spend approximately $300,000 per operating day. So we had 12 hours of funding left. So thank you to this body, to the budget committee, to our staff, to our community for putting us on a stable path for our students in the future. The board reserve account was funded by the sale of 7 surplus properties that have sold to date, and we have 2 additional properties that have been identified as surplus by this body and are currently out for sale. One has an offer and is under contract. That is the surplus acreage at Butler Creek, and one is a rental home that is vacant that is currently being prepared to be put on market. The balance of the board reserve account is currently $5,946,558. Over the next 12 months, if both remaining properties close, and we anticipate they will, we anticipate additional proceeds of $3,637,000 for a total balance of roughly $9.5 million. What this does not include is the $358,000 that was allocated by this body for the projectors. So you could also factor in repayment of that if that's approved by the budget committee over the next 5 years. I would also say the board reserve account is going to be proposed to be a separate fund in the budget. It's currently in the general fund because that's how the resolution was written. And to be a separate fund, it does have to have an ongoing recurring revenue stream that is not just transfers from the general fund. So at a future board meeting, I will be recommending that it be established as a separate revenue fund and to have a source of ongoing dollars to that so that we can keep it separate and apart so the board has additional layer of oversight, additional layer of transparency, and it's clear and distinct from operations that support students, because we don't want folks to think that we're using funding that's for students on other things. So just, again, another accounting best practice to have separate funds. Bond contingency funds, the remaining balance in the overall bond contingency fund account is $5,542,914, as Scott Rose reported just a few moments ago. Ongoing major construction projects at this point for which the district still has some risk for completion includes our gymnasiums, our middle school projects, the swimming pool, and mechanical upgrades. We have about $4 million worth of mechanical upgrades that have been bid out or are being bid out. And that will be very invasive construction because it's going into hidden areas of buildings where mechanical ventilation and other things are held. So there may be, when I say there's some risk in there, that's risk of schedule delays, risk of additional cost, risk of unknown scope, because that's opening up wall work, right? So risk remains in all these projects. Inflation, unforeseen conditions, material shortage, and additional costs to the district are certainly possible. We anticipate that up to $1.5 million of remaining contingency could be needed to support the completion of all the approved projects. I think that's a very, I would say, I would use the word financially conservative estimate. I believe it will not exceed the $1.5 million. I have no indication that it would. I'm hopeful that it would be materially less than $1.5 million. But when we're thinking about possible below-the-line projects, it's important to make sure that we can get all the above-the-line projects across the finish line, if you will. So the result is roughly $4 million is anticipated to be available to support additional new, in quote, bond projects. They may be new in so that they're not approved at this point in time, but certainly as Superintendent Owens described, we've been informed by the Long Range Facilities Committee, we've been informed by the community, by polling, where some important issues lie and some important opportunities lie for these funds. And with that, I think it's important to talk about those so you're not presented with them maybe the first time that you have to consider approving them. So, I'd like to give you some background on some of the potential projects. So, needs of the districts, and these are not programmatic. So there are additional program needs that we could consider. These are identified as facilities needs of the districts. Programmatic may be things like the gymnasiums, where that's an opportunity to enhance student programs, which very important and something we should definitely consider. So that's why I'm drawing the distinction that this is just for facilities right now. There certainly could be others. They generally fall into 4 classifications: safety, security, or sanitation, structural, building integrity, student learning, co-curricular or community supports or facilities, and facilities for student, staff, and community. So in the first classification, if you will, we have safety, security, and sanitation. There's an opportunity to remodel CHS locker room to improve line of sight. If any folks have been in that locker room, it used to be a locker room for 2 genders, and now it's 1 because it's grown and another locker room has been built. And there are clear add-ons and rooms that are it's not the way you would build it. And it's hard to supervise a large number of students in a confined space without clear line of sights. So there's opportunity there. We have asbestos tile remaining in the district. To be clear, all friable tile or damaged tile is repaired immediately. We don't let anything go on that's not. So generally there is lots of asbestos tile that is getting to the end of its life and is a potential hazard because it could become friable if it were damaged, which would then be dangerous to students. Additionally, we have asbestos in some of our popcorn ceilings in the districts. There's an opportunity to abate that. We have an opportunity to replace security blinds throughout the district to make sure that our classrooms have security blinds, that they are in good repair, operable, and ready, prepared in case of emergency. There's various curbs and concrete paths throughout the district that have been damaged over time, which may be tripping hazards or other accessibility or mobility opportunities that we could address. Additional lighting. I heard Director Shields speak about the potential for additional exterior lighting earlier when you were discussing the existing lighting project. There's certainly opportunity to expand exterior lighting as we look to partner with more community members using our facilities, using our gyms in the evenings potentially and otherwise. We may want to consider adding more parking lot lighting. We may want to consider adding more lighting to the buildings that those gyms are attached to. Upgrades for drinking fountains. So if you've been to some of our schools lately, we have drinking fountains that, are not the sensor or not the bottle filters. They're the kinds that I had in school, which is kind of turning the knob, right? They work, they function. We do healthy and safe schools. We have everything tested. So it's not that is not necessarily unsafe. That's probably more of a sanitation issue where we maybe don't want mouths on drinking fountains anymore and might want to go to bottle filters and other bubblers. So secure bus and storage. This was part of the resolution to sell the auxiliary bus lot, is that we identified if we sold the whole thing, we need to have some additional parking for at least about 1 acre. It was identified as surplus because we certainly didn't need the full 5 acres. It went widely unused. It was a vandalism hazard for us. It was not going to be developed. And so that was a smart decision by this body. But we do have some need for additional secure storage so we can continue to transport students. As our walking students continue to encounter hazards and other issues on their way to school, we are identifying more and more routes as eligible for transportation. And so part of that is having reliable busing. Security rollers on roofs to prevent climbing and damage to recently repaired roofs. We have, upwards of $7 to $8 million worth of roofing being done on part of this capital bond. Part of the damage that was incurred over the years was folks getting on our roofs that shouldn't and, creating damage. And so There are things other than barbed wire that I would recommend that we put up to hopefully deter people climbing on our roofs. One of those are called roller barriers. They go on the edges of the roofs and they just spin, so people can't climb and can't get the leverage they need to get up higher, and it's safer. Security controls around playgrounds. This is access controls more appropriately to the building adjacent to playgrounds. Currently, we have only keyed access in most of our buildings off our playgrounds, and so if you're a teacher who doesn't have a key to that door, you can't get inside. So giving opportunity to have access control where people could use their fob to get in would be a nice way for folks to have accessibility and safety around our playgrounds. Security gates. Unfortunately, the recent vandalism and theft of the Food for Families trailer at the high school continues to identify an opportunity there for us to improve the security at the high school. We'll be addressing that with lighting and with security cameras, but there's also an opportunity to put vehicle gates up after hours. Still allow pedestrians to use our fields and use our facilities as approved by the board and is consistent with our community partnership, but perhaps vehicle gates like we have at the district office would be a good investment for our facilities. Along structural and building and integrity, we have additional roof replacement. We are doing $7 to $8 million worth of roofing across the district. We estimated that we could spend up to $60 million if we wanted to replace every roof in the district. Now, thankfully, not every roof needs to be replaced in the district, but there will be more roof work identified after the bond projects are complete. If you think of it as maybe a tier 1, 2, and 3 process, where tier 1 is almost a new roof, really just needs a little bit of maintenance. Tier 2 is an aging roof. Maybe it's got 15 years of life on it already, and it's getting there. And maybe you'll have an occasional leak with the extreme weather we've had. And then you have tier 3, where you have active leaks, you have a known roof failing, you have soggy conditions. We're addressing all the tier 3, and we're trying to patch the tier 2 to the best of our ability. But there's other projects that kind of go up the scale, right? And so there will be an opportunity for some additional tier 2 roof repair when we're done with completed projects, and we'd like to do that. We'd like to do all these if we had the funding. Roof repairs at Butler Creek, some very minor roof repairs at Butler Creek. That's largely, a solid roof that's been well maintained, but there are some repairs, and we want to continue to do that maintenance before it turns into a tier 2 or tier 3 issue, right? Boiler replacement at Butler Creek. Unfortunately, the quality of the boilers that were installed 20 years ago aren't at the same level as the boilers we have in many of our schools that were installed 50 years ago. The old expression, they don't build them the way they used to, kind of rings true with the boilers at Butler Creek. They're operating, they're functioning, but we've been informed that we should consider replacement when we're able to. Boiler replacement across the district will be a larger possibility. Again, we've got some ones that are functioning really well, even though they're old, but there's some you can't buy parts for anymore, and we're kind of limping them along as well. So it's just another opportunity. One of the nice things about the bond projects is we will have updated control systems, updated burners, and maintenance done on all the boilers that we're keeping. So they'll be operating to their peak ability, but at a certain point in time, even their peak ability will wear out. We have damaged, stained ceiling tiles throughout the district. That's an opportunity. It's not a structural issue, perhaps. It may be a building integrity or part of the ceiling integrity issue. Also, it's just really, attributes to the aesthetics and the inviting environment for our students. I like our students to come into, light, bright, clean, well-maintained buildings, and that's certainly part of it. We have some roller door replacements at our CHS annex. For those of you that may or may not be familiar, the annex is the building that's to the south of Centennial High School that stores a lot of art equipment and drama production and theater equipment, amongst other things. And the roller doors are original, I think, and need to be replaced. They're barely functioning at this point in time. Exterior paint to protect the siding of buildings. It was I was informed that many of our buildings haven't been painted in more than a decade, some potentially longer. We incorporated painting a couple of the buildings in bond projects already, and I think those have been well received, and we're protecting our investment, frankly. One of the best things you can do for your buildings is protect the exterior to protect everything inside by keeping the exterior solid, right? So that's an opportunity as well. Upgrading plumbing fixtures to high efficiency systems is also another opportunity. Air conditioning for student learning environment and co-curricular supports category. Air conditioning, we've all seen what's happening, what's going on with the environment. We saw the record temperatures last summer. We know that we want to expand summer programming. It's been identified as a budget priority. It's hard to have school when it's 110 degrees outside and it's 85 in the building. So this would be an energy use, and hopefully some of our energy efficiency engagements with mechanical and with lighting would help offset some of the consumption, but also we need to be able to support our students if they're in the building. Carpet replacement throughout the district. We have many rooms with carpet, certainly that's worn out and has seen better days. That's an opportunity for us as well. That wasn't identified as a bond project. It didn't rise to a level. We have had a lot of need in the district. We'll still have a lot of need when this is done. New student furniture. We've been buying new classroom sets as we're able, as they're broken out of operation funds, but that many of our classroom furniture is many years old. I look at desks in Pleasant Valley and other locations, and I would not be surprised if they were 30 or 40 years old. And do they meet the needs of the learning environment as we are currently providing? Are they able to support a tablet? Are they able to support a Chromebook? Or do they have a configuration? Are they able to support our students? Are they in good repair? We want to create environments that are conducive to learning, and part of that is, where is the student going to be for the hours a day that they're here? Football field conversion to turf. This board has talked to us, and we've engaged with our community groups and our sports partners and in our teams and our athletes, our student athletes. Clearly, there's something that needs to be done with the turf, with the grass field at the high school. That's an opportunity potentially for a bond project or for other funds. Track replacement at CHS is also identified. It was in the pre-bond planning, and it was something that was considered to be an important project. It fell just below the line with the feedback. And so if we have extra funds, that might be an opportunity to add that. We did the other tracks at the middle school level, so potentially at the high school level. Acoustics for the pool. If anybody has been in our swimming pool building over the years or recently, it gets very loud. As Rod, our swim instructor and coach, because he coaches swimming and teaches swimming as well, has said it's very difficult to instruct students when you have 30 of them in that building, because the acoustics are just terrible. They can't hear you, you can't hear them. Also acoustics for our theater and our auditorium. There's an opportunity to improve that for our performing arts folks. Paint for all interior spaces. We discussed the exterior spaces, likewise our interior spaces. I'll say our maintenance and our custodial crew, like IT here tonight, work long hours and do a great job trying to maintain our buildings. But they need some extra help in, getting our buildings in tip-top shape. We're going to do a lot of great work with this bond. It'd be nice to add some additional light and bright, warm and welcoming spaces. Football goals for Oliver. So you may have noticed or may not that we have football goals for Centennial Middle School over here. We have a youth program over here. We could potentially have another opportunity to expand that youth program at Oliver. We don't currently have goals to provide them. It's just a flat field inside of the track. Covered play areas at elementary. This was also another below-the-line opportunity in the bond projects. And so the weather we're experiencing, even in April this year, there should be opportunities potentially for additional covered play areas for students as a possibility. And now moving on to our overall community and serving everyone, families, students, staff, community, and just pride of the district. Improving our parking lots and bus lane improvements, exterior improvements to our schools, additional signage, graphics, murals, exterior door replacement, low maintenance landscaping. Again, just taking care of our facilities. When our students walk up to them, do they look welcoming? Do they look inviting? Do they look supportive of learning? Do they look like a place they want to spend the next 6 to 8 hours, a day, every day of the weekend? Do they look like, what we want to present to the public and to the community? So just opportunities there. So overall, just to give you a kind of a summary of the estimated cost on these, this is, as we say in construction, it's a rough order of magnitude. So this is not a defined cost, but a ballpark, if you will. The safety and security initiatives add up to about 6.2 million. The structural, building integrity, and core systems add up to about 13.75 million. Student learning environment and co-curricular, about 8 million. Family, student, staff, community, the last category serving all, just under 5 million, for a total of between 32 and 35 million dollars worth of additional need. As a long range, it's a large number, somewhat expected. The long range facilities planning team estimated we had about $140 million worth of need in the district. And again, generous community that we're so grateful to for passing the bond. It was 65 millions. We had the awesome state grant of about 7.5 million. We've received some additional seismic grants and ETO money and otherwise, which has helped as well. But there's still a large remaining amount of opportunity and need in the district. And so that's a summary of what it adds up to. In regards to the long-range facility plan that you all spoke on earlier, it is the intent of the administration to re-engage that process with board support, to support the bond and the oversight committee with the district. So we'd like to partner with DLR again. They led the long-range facility planning. We've engaged with them in discussions right now. They have the ability to reconvene that long-range facilities group. They've also been a partner with us on our middle school conversion. They also designed the ramp at Pleasant Valley. And so they are very aware of a lot of the emergent needs that have come with construction. And they're also informed of what else has been discovered on projects that they're not involved in. So it's, I would say, an easy lift for them and a natural extension of the work they did before and the work they're doing now. With board support, we would convene this body in the next 90 days and try and get a kickoff meeting and a process going. The committee would be tasked with bringing forward recommendations for contingency projects as well as future possible bond election consideration in 2027 for 2028 when we have the estimated 25% step down in rate. And this is a graph of the anticipated levy per thousand with our bonds. So you'll see that where that step down occurs. So it's been recommended that we could go out for kind of a smaller bond that would tackle many of the remaining issues, that would kind of fill that gap so that folks' taxes generally would not increase. They would continue to stay level. They wouldn't go down, but they would continue to stay level, and we would again be able to address many of these issues and continue to support Centennial students and our community. So I appreciate you hanging in there. That was a longer report than I anticipated, perhaps, but hopefully valuable and information for you all to have. I welcome any questions you may have.
All right, we'll go around the room and ensure that everybody has a chance. I'm going to start over here with Director Lynn.
One thing,
Oh, yeah.
we usually have a break at an hour and a half point, so depending on how our questions go.
We can take a break right now.
Was that what people would like?
That's what we do,
Great.
because we can't turn off our cameras and leave like we used to in
Yes.
the Zoom
Yeah.
environment, so.
Let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll get to your questions. Thank you.
you know? Yes, Pal Butte, because we displaced or we kind of landlocked their play area because it's between the building and the gym, and it's very hard to monitor. Kids would have to go around. So they had some basketball courts that were out there, and we're going to redo those with a cover. Go Coyotes.
All right.
Oh, really?
I hate to, never mind. I told my parents I hit a deer too, and I didn't really hit a deer. Okay, good. Okay. All right. Let's bring everybody back to order. Thank you all for a little bit of break time, and we'd like to get started on questions for Director Sutherland. Sutherton? Sorry.
Great, I'll just jump in there. Yeah, I just had kind of one question and two comments. One, is there student involvement in the committee or the process of bringing some of these projects to the board's attention? And then just two comments. Can we incorporate native recognition? And can we hear from staff about any safety concerns and how that can be addressed with some any kind of bond contingency stuff?
Yeah, those are excellent questions, Director Lynn. I wasn't part of the long-range facility planning before. It occurred before my arrival in the district. Do you know, Director Harden, if we had student voice?
There were with the, yes, for Centennial kids, there were some students involved. As far as the long-term facility planning, I don't think there was much of a student voice.
Okay.
I don't know if that was, they weren't outreach to, or they, you know, I don't know. I don't recall anyone in the room when I'm going through my Rolodex of people that were in there. There were definitely staff from the schools,
Okay.
but there weren't actual students, so that'd be good. Fine.
Regardless,
Yeah.
I think there's ample opportunity to include them, make sure we're including folks in when we reconvene the group. Because it is, you know, there's always opportunity to get more voices. And I'm happy to say we were just interviewing for our support service division dining services in this room last week. And we had students participating on that interview process to bring student voice to that process as well. So student voice is very valuable, and we want to incorporate it as often as we can.
Awesome, yeah, the more we can make it a formal process instead of just informal. That's great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Director Lynn. Next, we'll go right around the horn to Director Shields.
These might be questions that we could just talk about individually later, so you'll help me with that decision, excuse me. But one of the things that you were talking about was that the board reserve fund, we need to designate it differently than we have at this moment, right? And that would take us as a board discussion, correct? And you would explain best practices to us and how that should be set up. Something that had not been considered when we decided to have a reserve fund. So you're ready to have that discussion where? Is that at a board meeting? How does that work?
That's a great question, and yes, I would be happy to help in any way I can with determining or helping to determine items to consider, such as safety, such as student voice, such as others, when we're considering utilization of the board reserve funds. I think there should be a process, and I think it should be transparent. And I think it should have our students, the strategic initiatives of the district, Destination 2023, which may be updated to be Destination 2028 as we revitalize and re-engage to continue, because it's a continual process improvement. And so, you know, having all those things in mind, so that you as the governing body can make well-informed and supported decisions, and it's our job to provide that information to you. So yes, let me know how I can help. I can certainly bring best practices from government finance organizations and recommendations on utilizing those funds and things to consider. And if we can, at a future board meeting feels appropriate, it could be a report or a recommendation to the body if you prefer.
One of my concerns is that we've all, you know, we're looking at below the line projects that can be funded from current funds, right? But we're also looking at that reserve fund without, well, I was gonna use barriers, but it's not barriers, it's bumpers, right? To be within, and we don't have that kind of structure. One of the questions that I have is thought about saving the 40-some thousand dollars a year on the projectors and the interest that we would have been paying out for that.
Right.
We designated the board reserve fund for that, but we didn't talk about how the budget committee could be informed about reimbursing, if you will, because this money is one-time shot. Once it's gone, unless there's a way to get it back for things like saving ourselves some money for these short-term purchases, short-term being 5 years. I'm concerned about that, and so in that best practices conversation, I think that that's the kind of thing I would be looking for, is help with that, because it's called the Board Reserve Fund. And to be informed by all of the people, places, things that you've just discussed, but ultimately a decision that the board has to make. And I don't know where those bumpers are.
Is that the question you're asking, really, of Director Southerton? Is, I think you'd said that the board reserve fund is technically actually part of the general fund right now.
Right
But
now.
that you were going
Currently
to
is.
bring forward a resolution or something that we would split it out so that we had more transparency on how, and I think that's what Pam's asking is, when are
See,
you gonna
I
do
obviously-
that?
Yeah, that's what I think we need the discussion about, because it looks like a pot of gold. And
Right.
And the other thing that I saw in your presentation about all the below-the-line projects, and after we went through long-term strategic planning, or long-term facilities planning, excuse me, and the thing about, coming up, right, in 8 years, is that what we were looking at is all of the, if you will, and I don't know other ways to say it, but sexy projects. Community would get behind a bond to do these things. What I saw on that below-the-line list is all the stuff that's, internal and not that, it just needs to be done. And so, when will you as district, staff say, we need to come looking at the board reserve fund? Is that the way we want the board reserve fund to be used? I think there's a real discussion on it, a deep one, and maybe a work session, Chair Solosky, to help us just talk about it, because there are those of us who were here when we established it and lived through, as you said, 12 hours worth of that's all we had, and we had to borrow money to get ourselves through. And then there's others that are new and haven't had those experiences, other than they've had experiences knowing what public education has gone through. But maybe not this
Or
district.
experienced it as parents and,
Exactly,
the curtailment
yes.
of programs and sports and other things, yeah.
Yes, yeah, and I just feel like we
Or students.
need that kind of opportunity to talk about it, and the largesse of it, and the largesse of the responsibility of it, that we could best communicate to other boards, right? They're thinking of, at this time was this. So it would help other boards either continue or revise based on their new conditions or the situations they find themselves in. So that's when I was looking, I was like, whoa, how are we going to do that when we've got a list that is not a sexy list, and yet it's going to need to be
Yeah.
funded? So, anyway, thank you for indulging my rambling there. It was just, it's hard for me to even figure out exactly what my concerns are.
And-
They're just a feeling.
Yeah.
If I can offer, initiatives are not always mutually exclusive. There could potentially be an opportunity for this body to say, okay, this reserve account was created for many initiatives, facilities initiatives, potentially programmatic initiatives, and emergency funds in case of a major downturn. So potentially, you look at the board reserve account and you create decision criteria for each of those things, right? Those initiatives or goals, and you allocate a third, or, a portion of the fund for each of those initiatives, and then you say, okay, I've got $2.5 million. Let's get voices at the table, and let's create, Superintendent Owens might be smiling behind the mask, but create a decision matrix is what business managers and finance guys call it, and you take into consideration all the things that you say you really stand for and say really matter, and you want to influence your decisions, and you develop that weighting and that decision criteria, and you see how well that tactic, that goal, that project supports equity, supports inclusion of student voice, supports long-term programming for our schools, can be implemented, supports a wide variety of students. And, you know, well does that project meet what we say is the overall strategic goal and vision of the district? And it returns a number, and if it's above the line, to use the terminology of the meeting today, then it moves forward, and if it's not, it doesn't. That's the more objective way, rather than stuff that sounds good, right?
Thank you. Next, Vice Chair Fuller, do you have any questions?
Yes. So my question is can you remind me again how much was in the board reserve budget?
Absolutely, and I learned from speaking from memory earlier with Director Harden, so I'm going to pull up the slide. Current balance is just over 5.9 million. When the additional properties that were declared surplus by the district and not needed for education, when they close, it's going to be a little over 9.5 million.
I do think that I agree with Director Shields. We do need to have a conversation, sit down and have a conversation and really start writing out and just like sorting out things, figuring out what we want to actually preserve with this reserve money. And also I would love to see more student input in that as well too, just because they're the ones using the facilities.
There's a reason we're here.
They're the reason we're here. Yeah, exactly. But yes, that was it. Thank you so much for this presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. I'm going to skip over here to Director Harden.
My question was, with the bond reserve fund, wasn't there something that the board put through where we can't spend under 7 million? We must maintain a $7 million balance because we were going out for the bond and the bond rating and our credit, and we were honestly really scared about our ending balance, that we put a contingency in there where that balance could not be below 7 million. So even though it says it's 9.5 million, actually the only funds that we could access, unless we changed it and talked about this as a board, would be that 2.5 million. And like right now, we technically couldn't access that money because it's not at the $7 million mark, unless we made a resolution or adjusted it. So it's more of a comment, I guess, but I definitely wanted to put that out there in everyone's mind.
I have a follow-up. Oh, go ahead.
But that's two different funds. That's what,
That's not two different funds. That's the bond reserve fund from the property sales.
You're both right, if I can offer a comment.
yeah, that's,
Please.
you need to answer that.
There were two separate resolutions. One was creating the board reserve account, and it said the first, if I'm recalling correctly, the first $7 million of funds from the surplus of properties would go into the board reserve account. There's also the fund balance policy for the district that requires us to have 5 to 15% in an ending fund balance. If we have an ending fund balance over the $7 million, apart from the board reserve account, then you're meeting your compliance of having $7 million of your ending fund balance separate and apart from your board reserve account. And that is the position that we're currently in, to be transparent. We have ending fund balance estimated, if the proposed budget goes through as it is right now, estimated to be about $10.4 million, which is apart from the board reserve account. And that is the function of the difficult decisions that were made at the beginning of the pandemic, and also just savings that we've had from operating in a comprehensive distance model for that past year without having the on-campus expenses, and budget controls that we've put in place over the last 2 years. It's a culmination of efforts, and team and everybody involved that's got us to a stable place for the ending fund balance, in addition to the board reserve account, the revenue from the surplus property. Is that helpful? Okay. Very important, though, that we need to retain that ending fund balance. So if we used all our ending fund balance in the general fund and we spent down the board reserve account, we could be right back where we were. So
It is,
they're, sorry, Chair, please.
go, please, I'm sorry.
They're related, certainly. You don't want to make decisions about one in the absence of what's going on with the other.
Knowing that there's chunks of money that we're not spending in each of those accounts, are they just sitting in accounts, or is there a way that we could look into investing that 7 million so that at a certain point we could, use it more as an endowment than as a reserve fund?
Great question, and that's one of the things that I will be including in the proposed creation of the fund.
Great.
That we put it in our LGIP account, local government investment accounts. We have very tight restrictions on where we can put investments for
Right.
many of the reasons
Yeah.
I'm sure you can imagine. But LGIP is one of them, and they have decent returns comparable.
Cool. I look forward to hearing more about that. Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Director Andrews.
So, we talked about doing this presentation a few weeks ago, Director Southerton, and you did a great job. You really comprehensively covered everything. Rose had given me the approval to talk to you about this, and it just went really well. I was thinking that this was a good primer for approving some spending on the sports complex engineering and design. But now I see from looking at the agenda that we're not going to be approving any money spending for that project tonight.
You're correct. We anticipate bringing a fee proposal forward to the board at the second meeting in April in 2 weeks.
Okay, so we all need to remember this discussion now for 2 weeks when you bring forward
sorry.
that amount.
okay.
And, it's fine, I'm glad. We have a little bit of time now to marinate in it, and hopefully you make the PowerPoint available to all of us so we can kind of take a look at it. But I think this is more of a comment to all of us, is that we need to keep this in mind when we get to the sports complex, because one, that wasn't above the line for the bond, so we could use bond contingency funds. You'll go through all of this, or we could use, but the community did not want us to use bond money for the sports complex, or at least for the field part. So we'll have to have this discussion, the funding discussion in 2 weeks, right?
Yes, I'll bring the fee proposal, and I'll touch on, there's a phase 1 and phase 2, and I'll touch on that when that resolution or that item is before the committee later this evening, to help provide you some additional information if that's helpful.
Great. Do you have any questions, Superintendent Wentz? I just had a few things I wanted to mention. I didn't want to lose sight of Director Lynn's comment about a land recognition. I think that as we're doing all of these improvement projects, it would be really great for the district to be able to put something forward. I do have like some sample stuff that I've used in my nonprofit world that I'd be happy to share with you guys if you'd be interested in reading, seeing that land recognition. This is probably a complete pipe dream as someone who comes from the nonprofit world. But as we're looking at selling that house, is there any potential to look at partnerships with community partners, looking at either transitional housing for some of our families who are experiencing homelessness, or more services? You talk about summer camps or whatever, is there opportunity for us to look at that as an opportunity to build a partnership with a community organization? Or are we just like, if that's not possible, that's totally cool, but is it like we're just kind of putting it on the market to sell it to whoever will buy it?
So great question. I would say multitude of answers, right? Um, we're the administration serves at this body's instruction, right? And so if the board provides us direction, I'll just need to make sure it's in compliant with whatever regulation that governs that, right? But we look to you for direction. The current direction, based on the resolution was passed, is that we need to create this board reserve account to stabilize the district and be able to invest in programs for our students, right? And so whether or not that's selling the house for top dollar, quote unquote, so that we have more money to invest in programs for our students, or if it's investing for our students to utilize that property in a different way, we're all here for the best for our students, right?
Great.
So I think there's opportunity to see what's out there.
Thank you. Director or Vice Chair?
I really liked that you brought that up, especially since I know that a lot of folks are facing a lot of houselessness here in the district. I know that the Centennial apartments that were the old bowling alley is coming up well, but I think that it would be very helpful, and then also like us giving, we're continually giving back to the community to invest in them so they can invest in us. An opportunity, and that's why I think we should also have student voices on this have just bringing up the opportunity to do transitional housing or just different things like that. I know that money can be used in different ways, but so can property, and so can other, it's not just about the concrete material solutions we can use. If we have property that is rental housing, then we might want to think about utilizing that.
Yep.
While we have.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your time and
Thank you.
expertise. All right. Next, we'd like to welcome CEA President Alicia Brown to share a CEA update or report.
Hello, I'm here.
Excellent, thank you.
Can you guys hear me okay? I know we're in a new format, so I don't know. I hope you can all hear me okay.
We can hear you.
Good, good. All right, so, yeah, we've had 2 sessions of bargaining so far. And we've gotten through a handful, well, not gotten through, we've touched on a handful of our topics, and interest-based bargaining is always kind of slow going because we have a lot of conversations and we talk a lot about our interests and the things that we want, the reasons why we're proposing different things. But it's been very good, and like I said, we've touched on a handful of our topics, so we've achieved everything in our agenda so far. And as always, when we're doing bargaining, we talk about different subjects such as like workload and compensation. And as we all know, it's been a hard year. We've had staff shortages. We've had, positions that have gone unfilled. We've had people that have quit or retired, and we haven't been able to fill those positions for both certified and classified positions. And it's just been really tough because then it increases the workload for the rest of the folks that are in that building. And the sub shortages also have put a big impact on teachers giving up their prep time, educational assistants having to do multiple different types of jobs, secretaries having to cover other, multiple jobs, and, including doing their own job just because we have the staffing shortage and we still have to get things done. And now that we're coming into the hiring season, where people are, new teachers are completing their teacher prep programs and becoming, able to get jobs for next year. Staff retention and recruitment is a major concern at this point, because one of the things is we want to retain the people that we already have, and we also want to recruit high quality folks for those open positions that we have. And we're going to be competing with other districts, and in East County and in other places across the state. So, how do we keep the people that we have and recruit quality staff for the coming year? Because we don't know what next year is going to bring. I don't foresee that our staffing shortage is going to get that much better. There's just less people going into education right now and more people leaving it, and that's just kind of a fact. It's not going to magically, get better just because we start a new school year, right? And so, things around workload or caseload, class size, and planning time. Compensation includes like salary, benefits, and bonuses, like hiring and retention bonuses. We have monies that can be used for these things to help out with the retention and workload and compensation and recruitment. And history has shown that staff shortages disproportionately impact students of color, students from low-income backgrounds, and students with disabilities. So basically, our most marginalized students are being impacted the most by having these staffing shortages. We can use some ESSER funds and for retention and recruitment. And we can also use funds from the House bill. There's a new House Bill 4030 that just passed recently. Those things can also be used for retention and recruitment. Like I said, we will be competing with other districts for staff in all classifications, from teachers to, classified folks to administrators even. And we want to make sure that our district is the best and has the best perks for people when they are looking at working in Centennial. And, a lot of that goes along with looking at the pay and the benefits and the different workload perks that we would have. Like, what are we doing to alleviate the workload in these times where it's hard to find qualified staff? We want to make sure we're competitive with other East County districts so that we can attract the best candidates for our open positions. And so, and a lot of the reason why people are leaving school employment is, it's a lot of stress, and another reason is insufficient compensation or high workload. So, I just wanted to share with the board some of the things that we can do to help to increase staff retention and hiring, and just have you guys really consider like creative ways that we can make sure that we have qualified staff and we have all of our positions filled for next year. Because I definitely know that like I said, this staffing shortage isn't just going to go away because we start a new school year. So it's going to be important that we put effort and a lot of intention in filling those positions. And that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Appreciate that. Are there any questions or comments? Nope. Okay, next up, we would like to welcome OSEA Vice President Chris Dowell to share an OSEA update.
Hello, I have finally defrosted from our track meet. My daughter's in track and we are new to track this year, and it's cold. OSEA, much of what Alicia said in terms of recruitment is definitely on the concern for OSEA members. We have more and more people who are announcing that they're retiring or that they're not going back. I talked to an EA today who is making $1,000 a week at Amazon, and there's just no way the district is able to compete with that. So I think that I am hopeful that there are new ideas. But in happy news, we're able to do in-person visits again. So I was visiting Patrick Lynch today, and I forgot how much of a people person I am personally. And so it's just nice to be out in the buildings and talking to our members. Patrick Lynch had 9 new classified staff, and we're not even sure we have the freshest numbers. So new staff in our district is a hopeful thing. Maybe we're getting better, but it was fun to reach out to people, and I am. OSEA as a whole and Centennial is in kind of a reorganizing phase. We do have a lot of turnover that has happened in the last couple of years, and so kind of getting people reconnected is important. And that's where we're at. That's all I have this month.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate that. All right, that concludes our report section. We'll move on to section 6, confirmation items to be confirmed in mass. Everyone had the opportunity to look over those things in the board packet. Were there any questions, or are we ready to put forward a motion? Yes.
On item 6.6.1, the surplus transportation equipment, kind of what Chair Solowski was discussing earlier, is there a process that we kind of evaluate if some of the surplus stuff can be repurposed or given to nonprofits in the community or some other purpose than just the scrap value?
Great question.
The short answer is I'd be happy to engage in the process that the board would like us to. Our current practice has been to maximize value to the district, thereby to the students. So if it has any useful life left in it, board policy is that we try to sell it or try to monetize it in some way for surplus property that's no longer needed. But if we wanted to update that surplus policy or provide different direction, we'd be happy to work with you on that.
Great, yes, I would like that, because say, for example, Food for Families just recently lost a truck, and if there's some way we could turn something we're going to throw away and get scrapped into something useful for them, that'd be really good.
Right.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to reach out to them to see if they had any interest. There is the one box truck that is being surplused. It is typically when we're surplusing it, it's at the end of its life, or it's not worth repairing because we want to get the maximum value to the district, but I'm happy to reach out if that's okay with the board.
Thank you. I see a hand for Director Shields.
Are we still keeping some of our older buses for spare parts? Because that's exactly what we were doing.
Yes, we have kept the buses that will be valuable to us in any way as spare parts or as operational.
And that goes back almost to the question too about, when you were mentioning boilers, we were actually going to decommission schools to pick up boilers to get parts to maintain our old boilers. So
Wow.
It doesn't, when we talk about old stuff, we don't get rid of it because we got old stuff. So sometimes we need it.
Yes.
Because you can't find the parts, so that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You might
Yeah.
not want to get rid of some of our old stuff.
Yeah.
Just for that purpose.
We have, like so many positions at Centennial, we have some very talented mechanics in our transportation department, and they do an amazing job keeping our fleet on the road. And we have them evaluate every bus before we look at surplusing it to take off anything that's of value by any means and let us know if we can get rid of it. We are up against a clean emissions standard. We can't run anything that doesn't meet 2007 or better emission standards. So even some of the old buses that may run, we're no longer, as a government agency, allowed to utilize them after a certain date.
Thank you.
One note, if I may,
Please.
Chair, is 10 of those buses do have to be decommissioned for the grant. Okay, thank you.
Great.
Chair Solowski.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted everyone to be cognizant of the time.
Yes, thank you very much. Is there a motion to confirm and mass these items in 6?
I'll make a motion to confirm the confirmation items.
Thank you. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Great. Unanimous there. The ayes have it. All those items have passed. We will move quickly to old business under board action item 7.1. And I believe It's you again, Paul. Thank you.
You're welcome, or I'm sorry. Depending on how you feel about it. Sorry. So this evening for the board consideration, we have awarding of up to 5 projects that are already part of the bond planning process. So we are, and I need to double check the agenda. I may have clicked on the wrong one. We're athletics complex, I'm sorry. So I will lead with that one. I apologize. So the administration and RNC management group is recommending award of the civil engineering and design services to Robertson Engineering for the civil engineering and design contract for the district. They would be our prime vendor for the sports complex. It's part of an RFP process in Oregon for public bodies. We're not able to solicit a fee at this point in time. So there is a fee forthcoming that would be further considered by the board. And if it doesn't meet our budget parameters, the board can then go to another RFP respondent that could meet the parameters of our budgeting. But to further explain the process, the district did issue a request for proposal for the civil engineering and design services for the sports complex. We received 3 proposals, including one from Robertson Engineering, Cardno, and HHPR. While all are qualified, Robertson has unmatched experience in our region, designing 46 all-weather fields, including 17 in-place conversions from natural grass to synthetic turf, which is the core project around the sports complex upgrade that we're considering, in just the last 7 years, all at districts and other locations within 1 hour of Centennial. So there's an opportunity to go and see all these projects and engage with their references, which we have done before recommending this. We've engaged with their references. We haven't seen all the projects. I don't want to represent that, but before considering approval. If awarded, Robertson will work with the district to determine the scope and provide a fee to the district for proposal of phase 1, which would be designing the sports complex master plan, which we discussed. How are we utilizing our facilities currently? What is the best use of our facilities? What improvements should we consider to support our student athletes and our community? And then phase 2 would be if the board decided to move forward with any of those recommendations, if it wanted to move forward with resurfacing the track, improving baseball or softball facilities, converting from grass to turf on our all-weather, our main field. Then at that point, they would give us another fee proposal to move forward with whatever work the board said they wanted us to pursue, if that makes sense. We estimate that phase 1 will be roughly around $25,000 to engage with stakeholders and design a master plan. And then phase 2 would be more for implementation and doing the civil engineering, the drainage, the construction documents, the bidding, the managing, working to manage the contractor who did any of those projects. And that would be more of a sizable fee. I think we've discussed in an earlier meeting that it's estimated to be in the $300,000 or $350,000 range, depending on the scope. And it may be the will of this body or the instruction of this body to use any of the funds that we've discussed earlier this evening. So it may be appropriate to use board reserve funds for one aspect. It may be bond funds for other aspect. It would be up to you and bond oversight and other folks that you want to engage with. So it's our recommendation that we award the RFP for the civil engineering of the sports complex to Robertson Construction.
Question, Director Andrews.
So you didn't mention the stadium. That's part of it too, right?
Correct. It's part of the strategic plan. Thank you, Director Andrews.
Do I have a motion?
Yeah, I move that we award the first part of this to Robertson Engineering.
Second.
Thank you. Let's go around the room. We'll start on the other side of the room this time. Do you have any questions or comments?
No questions. I'm prepared to vote.
Excellent. Director Andrews?
No.
Director Shields? Director Fuller?
No.
Great. That means we will be voting on awarding the civil engineering and all of it to that Robertson group. And can you repeat that for me so I can get it actually correct?
Absolutely. We would like to award the civil engineering and design services for the Centennial Sport Complex to Robertson Engineering.
Great. First, we will ask for any affirmative votes. So those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Ah, unanimous. I love it. Great work. The ayes have it. Moving on to new business 2.1. And that looks like Dr. Katsuda. No.
Of the multiple bond projects.
I apologize. I was going on my notes from yesterday. 7.2. Also Paul.
Thank you, Chair Solowski.
Director.
The administration and R&C management is recommending the approval to award multiple construction contracts for the following work. Security system upgrades to Accurate Electric for $1.8 million, $1,806,831. Intercom replacement work to Huser Integrated at $482,411.32. Fire alarm replacement, also to Huser, at $678,283.21. Roofing replacement to ABC Roofing at $704,992. And Pleasant Valley seismic upgrades at $2,332,000 even. I apologize, the total is not listed under there, but it is in the recommendation at the bottom of the paragraph. So for a grand total of $6,004,517.53. There is a brief description of what each project will entail. The security system upgrades will include cameras, access controls, and intrusion sensors at all 9 schools. Intercom replacement will be a full intercom replacement at Patrick Lynch, Powell Butte, and Pleasant Valley. These sites were identified as needing to be completely replaced as part of the assessment of the systems. You'll also note, though, that Oliver and CMS are getting intercom projects under the guaranteed minimum price contract you approved for Emmerich Construction this past winter. So that project work is taking place this summer and is not part of this quote and has already been approved. Fire alarm systems for full replacement at Meadows, Patrick Lynch, Park Lane, and Powell Butte. Again, based on system reliability, we have various systems of various age, and these were deemed as needing to be those tier 3, really wanting to replace. Please note that full fire alarm system was also awarded for Oliver as part of that previous award. So it will be a total of those 5 schools. 4 schools on that one, 5 on the intercom. The seismic upgrade at Pleasant Valley includes both bond-related work, which you may recall was redoing a lot of the brick work at the school. That will be part of the seismic, and now they will be doing roofing, shear walls, seismic improvements to the main building, and we received that $2.5 million grant to fund the majority of that work. It's anticipated that any additional funds that aren't covered by the grant will be within the budget already allowed to Pleasant Valley for that seismic improvement. At this time, every assigned project budget supports these awards. We don't have to utilize any of the bond contingency funds that we spoke earlier about. We may use some in-project contingency funds, but not any of the set-aside. And the administration recommends the board of directors approve the award of these 5 construction contracts to the 4 identified contractors who were the low bidders for each project respectively, for a grand total of $6,004,517.53, and designate authority to the superintendent, the director of business, or their designee to utilize in-project contingency funds throughout the course of the project as needed.
Chair, can I move that we approve as read?
Yes.
So I motion that we approve as read from Director Southerton.
Second.
All right, we have a motion out for an award of multiple bond projects as previously stated.
I have a question, if I may.
Please.
Just about the process. Does this need to go through the Bond Oversight Committee, or is it because it's not tapping into contingency funds that it is not?
It's a great question, and Director Harden, thank you so much. We did, with Director Andrews and Bond Oversight Chair Rod Betcher, notify them in advance of today's meeting that this was being considered by the board. They are approved projects already within the work plan, and we're not moving any funds from the contingency. So typically, they would not need to approve these, as they already, in a sense, have by the bond project plan, and we're on budget. But we did, especially after given some miscommunication opportunities, want to make sure that we read them in advance. And so we followed through with that, with this opportunity. And we received positive feedback from Karen and from Chair Betcher, I believe.
And Brandy.
And Brandy, thank you. Director
yeah.
Andrews.
Right.
Perfect, thank you.
Chair Salowski,
Yes,
was there a second on the motion?
there
Thank you.
was a second. Vice Chair Fuller. Any other questions as we debate? If there's no objection, let's take a vote. All those in favor of awarding the multiple bond projects, raise your hand and say aye.
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 None opposed. The motion passes unanimously. Now we can look at 2.1. Thank you so much. We'll be looking to consider student transfer limits.
So since we touched upon this in the last meeting, I wanted to be flexible and provide you a choice. Do you need the slides projected? Do you want to skim over that, or do you want to run straight through to the proposed the recommendations in the board vote?
I do not need the slides. Does anyone want to go through that? Great.
I'm
Let's
flexible. I accommodate. I'll accommodate.
appreciate
So-
that very much.
Going straight to the recommendation, we are recommending a number of non-resident students to attend Centennial schools. We're recommending 160 students as detailed in the board note across our school buildings. Are there any questions about that?
We'll go around the room. Yeah, Director
Yes,
Shields.
Yes.
I just, we had a cross conversation before everything began.
Yes.
I was asking the question as to why we would limit ourselves to only 30 students in our Centennial Virtual Academy. We also touched on this a little bit in the budget meeting about maximizing, if you will, the opportunities for our students as well as maybe, and in this case, other students, to take advantage of what our virtual academy has to offer, but not understanding what went into making the determination of 30. I just kind of need to understand why we wouldn't say 100.
Yes, that's a very logical question. I think a couple points to that. So a little bit of information and context on the current model of the virtual academy. We've contracted with Ingenuity, which is an online course platform. One of the requirements of successfully facilitating that is you need to have in-house teachers in your district as academic advisors to students who are enrolled in those online courses to keep them engaged and to provide the online or in-person supports that they may need to be successful in that program. So that does require staffing in the district, which is something we, as you have heard recently, have had to pay really close attention to. So because of the staffing factor or element to the program, it really requires us to be planful and plan ahead. I know Director Callahan and the Virtual Academy Administrator Jenny Lucas have been examining the engagement, student engagement, and the feedback from students and families as the program has progressed. And it is their goal to expand, extend, and enrich that program. So right now, a plan is in the works to incorporate courses taught by Centennial teachers to not only expand the course offerings that are required for a lot of our high schoolers, but to increase the engagement and the level of rigor of their learning experience. And because of that, it requires some pretty extensive planning, not only with our teachers in the brick and mortar schools to be able to offer that course, but weaving that coursework with the online offerings. So the ability to pivot, maintain capacity, and provide the level of rigor that we want for students is, it's an undertaking and requires some long-term planning. To be able to expand the enrollment of CVA to accommodate fluctuating sudden needs might not be as easy to do if we want to maintain the quality of that program.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been our intention all along, is to keep our eye on the quality of the program, to build the rigor, so not only so that we're meeting foundational basic needs of students academically, but we are going above and beyond that and really engaging them in learning. So CVA is not just a virtual academy to tick the boxes of credits earned. It's something that we intend to build beyond that. So 30 is what we see the program can accommodate from inter-district transfers into our district, while also still accommodating for the needs of students that we anticipate may want to enroll in that program. And that number has not been stable either. So we're really trying to keep our eye on stability of program for the sake of quality. That's a very long answer, but it provides you with a lot of context as to why that number just can't be open-ended, right? But it makes a lot of sense that we'd want it to be, given that it impacts our ADM. So, yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions, Director Shields? Yeah, you're looking at the clock too. Great. Director Lynn, do you have any questions or concerns? Director Harden.
My question was about the slots for the new middle schools. It's 10 for each, but Oliver, as we know, is going to be significantly smaller than, it'll be about a third of the size. So I'm curious how we came up with 10 for each school and why it's not proportionately divided between them.
In determining these numbers, I looked at the capacity of the building after we did the bond revisions, and the capacity allowed for us to accommodate 10. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Andrews. Vice Chair Fuller.
Thank you.
Excellent. I have nothing either. I think that we are ready to take a vote. So,
Chair, was there a motion and a second?
no, there was not a motion. I apologize. Can I have a motion?
I motion to consider student transfer limits for 2022 and 2022 school year. At least that's what it says on there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Second.
Will there be any further questions or debate? No? Great. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Another unanimous vote. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate that.
Our next recommendation is a length of transfer request. We're recommending that we grant transfer requests for students to the highest grade offered at the school level that they're transferring it to. So middle level, they'd be transferring, their transfer request would be granted up to 8th grade and so forth.
Great. Any questions? Can I have a motion?
A motion to approve the out of district transfer requests.
Even though I haven't brought that up yet.
Oh, sorry. Was that not?
I'm happy to talk about it.
Oh my God, which one am I looking at?
Am I missing something?
No, I can't figure out where the heck we are.
Yeah. Am I missing something, board vote?
The board just approved the entire document, correct?
Right.
I thought so.
Yep.
Oh, okay. So the whole thing's approved?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent.
Sorry about that.
Okay, good.
Makes
We're
it
done
easy.
on that one.
Appreciate it. Tips for going later in the agenda. All right, we've got a first read of the policy JFCJ, weapons in schools. Please.
Good evening, board. Great to see everyone. And if you would like, while we're talking about the first policy, weapons in school, I have a cleaner copy if you want to compare them. It's the same content, but the way OSBA has the policy now, this policy has a lot going on in it. So
Yes.
if that
Please.
will help you, I know it helps me to look at it. So, thank you. Again, content's the same, it's just visually a little easier on the paper.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem. We got to accommodate a variety of learning styles, myself included. So this evening with our first policy read of policy JFCJ, weapons in school, there has been a significant shift with new legislation that was passed with Senate Bill 554. It includes 2 amendments that you can see that's included. This does allow the public to possess concealed weapons if they have a license within schools. That's a significant shift that's been added into this. You can see that OSBA considers this policy to be conditionally required if school districts are prohibiting concealed licenses. So this policy almost has 2 parts. There is this policy in and of itself, and depending on how the board is feeling about that, then there's potentially another policy which is referenced at the end, which would be if we collectively, if as a board you would like to prohibit firearms, there is an additional policy that would be brought around that. That policy was not provided with this packet from OSBA, so depending on what you all would like to see going forward, then we would have to warrant a second read to bring that additional piece. And so when you look at the policy, the paper copy shows the cleaner version of what would be set. Everything that is gray is the new language brought forth by OSBA, and then you can see where there are strike-throughs, where they've adjusted some language. We also have collaborated with Pete Jetter, our district security individual consultant, to see if there are also any problems or questions that he has. This is a required policy, and we have had this policy since the 90s.
Great. At this point, I'd love to take a minute and go around the room to just test the temperature on how people are feeling about members of the public being able to conceal carry on district property. And we'll take it popcorn because I don't want to call on anyone to go first.
I'll jump in there.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Director Lynn.
Yes, I was very happy to see the legislation that was passed by the legislature. I think it's very important that we have the most restrictive policy possible, and I hope that we do move forward with not allowing anyone to possess firearms, with concealed carry or not.
Thank you. Director Andrews.
I agree with Director Lynn, with the exception of starter guns.
Track and field reference? Okay. Okay, good.
I'm on board. Safety in schools is the utmost important thing, and eliminating firearms in the school, I believe, is a good way to go. With that said, I mean, there is a constitution, that we have in this country that says people have the right to bear arms.
Mm-hmm.
So I also take that into a little bit of a factor. Personally, I'm all for this, but I don't feel comfortable about voting on it tonight.
Right.
Simply because there is a broader community that we service.
Yes.
And I would like to hear from that community and understand their side of things.
100%. This is first read, so yeah, we're just kind of seeing where everybody is. Director Shields? Yeah.
Denise, you mentioned that our security consultant has reviewed. Was there any input other than looks good to me?
It was a looks good. There were just, we did have a couple questions that we sent to OSBA. You might notice on the first page, they give the definitions of the 4 different types of weapons. And then later on page 2, there's a paragraph twice that specifically only refers to firearms and destructive devices. And so we followed up with OSBA why they have the differentiation. And part of it is because that is how the law was written. And so we just wanted to clarify if it was written incorrectly or if we were reading it incorrectly. So that was just the biggest concern. We just want to make sure we're clear about that.
And then, are you proposing that, well, I hate the way they deal with this, but, personal problem here. Will versus may. Are you guys going to come back with a second read with that choice made, recommendation made for us on the items that are bracketed?
So items that are bracketed, except for the will and may, all other bracketed language is current language that we have in our policy, so we would keep that language as well. With the will, if we go with the addition of wanting the prohibition, then we would say that we will have the gun-free zone pieces. May would be if we're deciding not to. So that would be a piece of just waiting for the feedback here.
And how do we have, or should we be waiting for that second piece before we move on this piece?
My suggestion would be yes, because I think we should,
See it as a whole.
exactly, yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And especially if that's, I'm hearing from the board that they have a preference for prohibiting weapons, so then that helps us to gather that additional information and then to bring both pieces back together.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, which is, yeah.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Fuller, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I'm very passionate about this and just having weapons in school in general. I know coming from basically as a black woman, and I don't mean to bring that into it, but just coming from that experience, and knowing having family members and listening to the students now, weapons don't always make them feel safe, if at all. And so I'm very passionate about no weapons on campus grounds at all. It's bad enough that we already have school shootings that we shouldn't have to worry about outside folks coming in, if that makes sense. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Great. Do you have everything you need to move forward?
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you.
First read policy JFC.
All right. So we have student contact. This policy in board book is much easier to read. So I also have additional copies if you need, but they're very, very closely linked. So if someone would want an additional paper, you got it. Because sometimes it's just easier to see it again on paper. And for this policy, as you can see in the board notes, there is specific language that speaks to making sure that we have policies in place that handle complaints, which we do, and this policy includes information regarding prohibiting retaliation on good faith reports, and that if we become aware of false reports, that we need to take that into consideration. We can't hold that against or for, so we need to make sure that we are not having false information provided. And in this policy, the bracketed language is all language that we currently have in our policy, so the recommendation would be to keep the bracketed language as well. And this is a required policy.
Thank you very much, Director Wright. Director Andrews.
Is there a chance that, I know that a couple of meetings ago, we talked about some policies we could just go ahead, we thought we could go ahead and approve because they had pretty de minimis changes. Is this one that you think we could do that with?
Yes.
I would offer, and this came up at the previous meeting as well, and it has to do with how we've worded the board book tonight, that if we're going to do that, that we word the agenda to say first read with the option of board approval, so that the public is aware that.
And we didn't do that.
And we didn't do that. So that was when we were going, bless you, when we were going through the agenda yesterday, that was one thing that Pam and I flagged for the future when we do a
Okay.
first read, to have that additional language on there.
All right, thank you.
Are you looking for anything else from the board?
No, it sounds like the board will be ready to review this next time, and we can
100%.
go from there. All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
That concludes the action items. Are there any future agenda items that anyone would like added to a future agenda?
I'll start with what's currently listed for future agenda items. So upcoming, we have the adoption of new language arts and English language development materials. We also have the adoption of school calendars for 22-23. And accompanying that, we have board meeting calendar for 22-23, because I think it's time to start planning our summers around our board meetings, or the other way around. Soon, not necessarily at this next meeting, we'll have the introduction of a new student representative to the board. And then the final thing I'll add is there was an interest in reviewing the coverage of our board zones in light of the 2020 census and the boundary reconfiguration process. So in essence, you know, as a board representative, which kind of area do you cover? And looking and seeing if there's any adjustments that need to be made with those two factors in mind. I've interacted with McKay Larrabee with Flow Analytics, who we just worked with on the boundary review process. And this is something that they support districts with. In fact, they're working with MESD right now on that. So it'll take a little bit of coordination, so I'm not sure we can have it ready for the second meeting in April. But Chair Solowski and I talked about potentially having McKay share a little bit with the board in terms of what services they can provide in this regard. And then potentially having a pre-meeting between her and I and any interested board member or two who might want to participate in that meeting with the pre-meeting with McKay. So if anyone's interested, you know, speak now or email me later that you're interested in working on some pre-planning on that, and then bringing the information to the board so that you know what that scope of work could look like.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. Any other things up for future agenda? Director Shields?
This is relating to a kind of a conversation we had in the budget committee meeting, or as an additional discussion point for budget. And that is a review of the district office staffing and whether or not we are appropriately staffed in the district office. The roles and responsibilities of our combined positions, assistant superintendent and HR director being one of the focal points, and whether or not this is the time to look at are we adequately providing services to the district from our district office through the staffing that we have currently.
Great. Thank you, Director Shields. Director Lynn?
Yeah, I should have a few things just for like way in the future maybe. I just making the rest of the board members aware, I've been talking with Superintendent Owens about the issue of naloxone, an anti-overdose medication. Hopefully people might want to look into that. Also, there is a Park Lane Park project that was right next to Oliver and Park Lane, and it has been drastically scaled back, and many of the amenities that were supposed to be added in the park have been taken out. And so the community association is working to bring parks back to the table on that. And so that might be a future agenda
Great.
item at some point. And then just for kind of the good of the order type thing, I just wanted to let know, in case anybody's watching at home, there's a Centennial Community Association is having a cleanup on April 23rd. And we're going to be based at the Regal Cinema, and at 10 a.m. then going out into the community to do a cleanup. So
Thank you so much, Director Lynn. Anybody else have anything? Director Andrews?
So, Superintendent Owens, my question about the board member realignment also had to do with the number of board members, and you responded to us about that. If I am the only one who's interested in having at least a conversation about it, I don't think we need to go forward on it. But if there are others that have some interest, it seems like that might be a good topic for a work session that would piggyback on the realignment.
So there were three things related to board alignment that I recall, one of which was just in terms of each director and kind of which slice of the district that they represent. The second was Director Shields had brought up the just
The numbering.
the numbering being that the zone is the same as the board position. So, and Secretary Jordan did some research on that, and the process is pretty simple. It's just board approving that change be made. I would recommend that if we're doing board realignment, that would be in one fell swoop. And then that would be, the final piece would be, my recollection, we were talking about the number of board directors that the board has, and I would defer to the board for the willingness to have that conversation.
I do recall the feedback from OSBA also stating that there's not a ton of 5-person boards, and that the recommendation, the concern being the motivation behind that and communicating that with the community could raise red flags when there are none. And so they recommended us staying at 7, but I'd be interested to go around and do a straw poll really quick to see if that is something that other people are interested in. Can we get maybe just a show of hands if anybody is interested in further examining, reducing the amount of board members on this body? 5? Yeah.
I think it's fine as far as including it with the rezoning, but I think we have much more important pressing issues on our plate, so.
Well, and plus,
hearing about the issues that Director Lynn brought up, it's like all of those I feel are more important than this.
100%.
and it has to go to the voters.
Yeah.
And that's probably something I should have thought about.
No worries. All right. If
I had a
oh, please.
sorry, hun. I would love to. I believe we have an application out right now. I work with participatory budgeting for Oregon, which is working to make budgeting process more transparent, more community involved. And what we did this past year is that we were able to have allocation funds from the AARP funds put on behalf of Representative Ricky Ruiz, Senator Casey Jama, and Senator Chris Gorsuch. So they allocated basically $690,000 of their AARP funds that's supposed to stay in East County, the district, for Gresham. And what we're doing right now is we're creating a participatory budget system. And I would love to go over with you guys more on that because we don't have the time. But it is a wonderful way for basically right now we're creating a youth voice. So it's for right now we're taking applications for a steering committee, students from the ages of 14 to 24. We're looking for that, and they would get paid $20 an hour. Basically to do research, figure out what the community in like Gresham, and this incorporates Centennial area as well too, on what projects they would like to see happen here in this area. When we were talking about youth, one of my passions is empowering them to feel like they can fix problems and come up with solutions. I know that I was never empowered when I was little. And I had tons of ideas and solutions. It was just not, there wasn't like a framework that would work for me to create that and make waves in my community. And so what we're doing right now is really, it's started, participatory budgeting started back in the 1980s. It started in Brazil. It has traveled all the way from internationally, but it's also come to nationals as well too. It was on the East Coast. It's actually still on the East Coast. It's been there and planted, and now it's moving westward. We are one of a kind type of organization that's really trying to like empower everyone to come to the table and get to work. Even though that the youth are the steering committee behind this, they will be working with adults later on in the process as well too, to help them come up with solutions and really invite the community in. And so I wanted to make sure that youth know here at Centennial, and we're trying to share it around all the East County schools, that this is a wonderful opportunity. It won't take up much time during your summer, and it's on virtual, so it's the cool thing about it too. So yeah, it's $20 an hour. It's a wonderful job. You get to work with me.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Vice Chair Fuller. Is there any way that maybe you can forward some of that information
Sure can.
to James, and
Sure
then he
can.
can funnel it down to Mari and we can see?
Yeah.
We are at 9:58, folks. This meeting